Thanks everyone for joining. Sorry, Sean.
I was just letting you know I started it.
Brilliant. Okay, mate. Thank you. So again, third time. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Mark Lawton from Risc IT Solutions. This is the Unifying Communications with Microsoft Teams session. And today, rather than having to listen to me for the whole hour and a half, fortunately, you've got three for the price of one. So I'm pleased to be joined by Mike from Wavenet, who'll be doing the second half of the session. And I'm also really pleased to be joined by Dom from Alzheimer's Research, who I'll be chatting to in a minute when we get into the main body of the presentation. So for those of you that aren't existing customers of ours, and I think there's a mixture of people on there that we don't know and those that are already customers of ours. So a little bit about who Risc are and why we're here talking about Teams. So we're headquartered in North Wales, hence the Welsh connection in Llandudno, and we've been in business for just over 20 years, always focused around cloud services, and primarily now around security, productivity and agility. And when I talk about productivity in the cloud, of course, I'm primarily talking about Teams at the moment because that seems to be the dominant product. We are a close partner of Microsoft's, so you can see there we've got some Microsoft Gold competencies there, and we also look after about 25,000 end users across about 1,000 organizations, as well as about 250 small IT partners that we work with across the UK. And just to expand on that, just mentioning Microsoft, they probably represent about 80% of what we do in terms of technology partners, and all of these other partners that we work with add services and service wrap around primarily Office 365, but also some of the other Microsoft services like Azure. So again, pleased to have Mike here from Wavenet. They're a partner we work with that help us to light up Teams with traditional telephony, contact center call recording primarily, which is the bulk of what we'll be talking about this afternoon. I'll also mention Red Store. They're a partner we've been working with for most of those 20 years, and they provide the backup and disaster recovery, cloud-based disaster recovery platform that we use with our customers. And also just very quickly mention Protos, because they're a partner we've been running the sessions with this week, and they focus around cybersecurity primarily, so Cyber Essentials and Cisco umbrella products like that. So that's a little bit about us, and just very quickly, just want to set the scene around Teams. And again, this is a slide I've been using for quite a long time and just seems such a long time ago now. So this is looking back to beginning of this year, so February 2020, and which was strange enough the last time I went to London. So this is actually a board in Euston Station, which was running an advert then for Microsoft Teams, which I hadn't seen before. And I'd just come from a meeting with Microsoft where we're talking about Teams. I thought, there's actually no escape from this. And this is obviously pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. So even then you could see that Microsoft were hanging their hat or, putting a huge amount of investment and focus around Teams. And then I thought, this is obviously the next big thing from their point of view. And at the same time, and actually a little bit earlier than that, in January, they started to put adverts even into the consumer market on TV. So this is a screenshot from an ad they ran in the NFL playoffs, which also was played in the UK on the Six Nations. So yeah, at the time, it was everywhere. Teams was everywhere you looked, and obviously rolling forward to where we are now, we're in a completely different world, and we'll cover some of the changes that have been that we've seen through that. So that seems like a good time to introduce Dom, actually. Kirsty, do you want to take over and share your screen just so everyone can see both Dom and I, hopefully? I might just need to stop sharing mine. Just give us a few seconds while Teams does its stuff. There we go. Brilliant. So good afternoon, Dom. Welcome. Thank you for joining the session today.
Hi, Mark.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That's okay. To kick things off, do you want to give us a little bit of background on who Alzheimer's Research are and what they do?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we are a research charity, fundamentally. So we've just started doing our own research, but majority of our work is to raise funds, and we work with other institutions around the UK to fund the research. They do research on our behalf. We're completely self-funded. We don't get any government grants. We're lobbying for that change. Which in the current climate would be ideal. And now, our kind of latest initiative is to perform some of our own research. So we're working with international partners and vendors. So people like the Gates Foundation on something called the EDON project, which is early diagnosis of neurological diseases. So that's our big push at the minute. But our aim is to get a treatment for dementia by 2025, which we're hoping we can get to.
Brilliant. No, that sounds good. And I'm jumping ahead slightly here, but I just wanted to ask the question clearly. You said self-funded and you're lobbying the government at the moment. Presumably, COVID's had an impact on what you're seeing in terms of income.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're not alone with most organisations and many other charities. We're going to take a hit and not get where we would have been pre-lockdown, but in the scheme of things, we're doing pretty well. So yeah, our supporters have stayed quite loyal to us in that respect. So yeah, not ideal, but could be a lot worse. I think it's a fair measure.
Yeah, I think it sounds about right for most people at the moment, doesn't it? And a little background on yourself and your role in Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so I joined must be about 2.5 years ago now. So my previous experience was around in pharmaceutical industry, private pharmaceutical industry, where there was almost no IT budget. It was very free spending. It was quite luxurious in that respect. And then I moved to a family-owned automotive retail business, which was almost polar opposite. It was very more, budgets were a bit more stringent, a bit tighter. I'll leave it at that. And at AOUK, my remit's like sort of everything internal. Everything IT internally is handled within my team. So that's from the infrastructure, networking, support, licensing, IT procurement, cybersecurity. We do a small amount of in-house development, but not a massive amount. And also we're looking at integrations, automations, that sort of stuff.
Brilliant. And how many users do you look after?
We've got around 215, 220 employees. Okay. And we're primarily based in Cambridge in our head office. So we've got a few regional fundraisers dotted around the UK, around 15 or so. But the rest of the gang, so to speak, we're all in one office in Cambridge, or we were anyway.
And if you can kind of think back that far to sort of this time last year, the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, can you give us a little bit of background to what you had in place in terms of telephony, contact centre, how people got hold of you through the phone?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the organisational setup, we have two main contact centres. One's to give information about the dementia out to supporters, or actually not to supporters, just to the general public. They don't have to necessarily do anything for us. It's just an information line. And then we've got a team called the Supporter Care Team who deal with our supporters. So they deal with any requests from people who want to donate to us, volunteer for us, ask about research information. It could be anything at all. Complain to us, hopefully not, but it could be anything that they take. And back in February we had it was a cloud PBX service. It was a little bit unreliable, I think, to say the least, and we had a few issues around reliability. It was feature packed, so to speak, but we didn't utilize a lot of the features. We didn't need to utilize a lot of the features in there. So so back in February, when we were all based in the office, we had functionality that we didn't use, and phone system that was, I always use a kind of analogy, up and down like a yo-yo, so to speak, and that was quite unnerving for our supporters and for our employees.
I think at the time you had tried to solve that a few times, hadn't you? But just kind of ran out of patience in the end. Was that pretty much a summary?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, we tried to work with our previous vendor to resolve the issues. It didn't work out, and ultimately we're a big Microsoft house. We're heavily 365 based anyway, so putting our telephony into Teams seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you were already using Teams at the time, is that right? Obviously not for telephony, but for day-to-day.
Yeah, so Teams was obviously available for a while, but we didn't ever do a formal rollout. So kind of our employees were seeing that they had it and that the app was installed on their desktop machine. Didn't really know what it was for. We didn't formally push it out because we wanted to do that, do the telephony piece. We were thinking we'll wait for the telephony and then roll it out properly with some expertise.
Right. Okay. So like most organisations, you'd done a bit and people had started using it and kind of trying to figure it out themselves.
Yeah. So people have heard of it, and they had a rough idea of what it was. And actually, when we put the telephony into it, that was what people were most surprised about. People didn't know that functionality was there in our organisation anyway. So it was a good learning curve for those guys as well.
So the issues you had back with the current telephony, how is that impacting your staff and customers?
Yeah, it's impacting both quite heavily. So our kind of employees, they were going frustrated, not being able to fill their roles. Certainly in the 95% of our users are your sort of typical standard office employees. You know, if your phone's down for 20 minutes, you can probably get on with other stuff. The contact center guys, when it was down for an hour, 2 hours, were really struggling. They were kind of sitting with their hands crossed, really. Their hands were tied at that point. Our other employees, obviously, there was frustration building in that they had to delay some of their tasks. And then when we did get the phones back up and running, we'd have grumbles from our supporters who were saying, you know, we couldn't get through to you. Luckily, at times, depending on the outage, we had a way of calling some supporters back. And they'd be really frustrated. You know, some people we lost calls completely, and what we actually did was we put a monetary value on the average call that we took, and then started to build up a picture of what it was costing us as an organisation, and it was quite substantial. Hence, that played a part in the decision to move away and move into Teams.
Yeah. So you probably already answered this question, which was how do you decide which direction to go? So you'd already made the decision. You were using Teams, so it made sense to bolt voice into it because there were people already using it.
Yeah, like I say, we kind of had those. We always thought, with our kind of history of and experience and trust in Microsoft, that it was always on the agenda to move our telephony into Teams. The timing was maybe pushed with the unreliabilities of the phone system. However, it was always on the cards, and like I say, we're heavily 365 based anyway, and we can leverage some charity pricing because we're a non-for-profit, which is even better for us. So all round, it seemed like the perfect fit for us.
And I probably shouldn't ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway. How did you find out about Risc?
Yeah, I remember
if you remember that far back.
I do remember this well, and yeah, it sounds quite a strange story. So I actually had a dentist appointment that day, and I went in to check in, and the receptionist said that the dentist's running 45 minutes late, and there's a pub opposite. And I didn't go in for a beer. I went in to just clear my inbox more than anything, and I had on my task list call Microsoft about putting our telephony into Teams, and I made that call in the pub actually, and they just said, look, we can. At first, their advice was, you know, you can do this yourself. You can do it. You can move your phone calls about and whatever else yourself. And I was keen to work with a vendor who'd done it before, got some experience. We could leverage their expertise. We had a couple of other big projects going on at the time. Didn't really have the resource to be able to take on that magnitude of project on our own. And they said, okay, well, we'll put you in touch with three vendors. And then we got a call from 3 vendors, one of which being you guys at Risc. And we invited you 3 vendors in. We met with you all, and and you were our preferred partner. So from our side, yeah, from our side, there's 2 reasons for it really. One, you were the most unsalesy.
Most unsalesy.
Yeah, which was
okay.
Quite, yeah.
I better have a word with the guys then. Not too pushy, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly that. And the project scope slip from some of the other vendors was massive, and I felt like it could have scaled out of control. We never had actually got to getting our telephony in Teams because we were thinking too far ahead. Whereas this working with you guys has been quite a logical approach to everything.
Good. And you obviously did some testing, and obviously I was there at the time, so I was involved in this to a certain extent. So you obviously ran a proof of concept just to make sure the technology worked. But I think you can get a feel very, very quickly whether it's going to be the right solution for you or not.
Yes, we did a bit of online research, and we did a bit of networking across some peers that I've worked with before. We've got some charity IT groups. Then ultimately speaking to you guys, and you guys giving us the opportunity to run the proof of concept, that was, in my mind, the best thing we did through the process, was because it cemented the decision that we think is a good idea, but there's no better way than to kind of test drive something, to get behind the wheel of it and give it a spin yourself, which is what we did. And yeah, it just cemented our mind it's the right thing to do.
And thinking back to the sort of time, I think it was probably mid-March, wasn't it, something like that, when you actually transitioned over to the new system, you switched over. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was great. So we obviously ran the proof of concept. That went really well. We put on another directorate of, I think it was around 45 users or so. As we kind of extended that pilot out, and we were getting constant feedback from the original 10-15 that we put on the proof of concept, and the positive feedback was great. We had a few niggles, a few tweaks we needed to make along the way, which just proved the value in doing the proof of concepts. And the kind of transition over was really seamless.
Yeah, it just happened to coincide with the time when you were looking to lock the office down, I think, wasn't it? So was that when COVID was starting to get a grip?
Yeah, exactly that. So I'm not sure if you remember the phone call I had with you the week of the training when I said, you know, are you sure you're happy to come in and do the training? Because we weren't locked down yet, but there was the rumour mill was starting and the government were just about to lock us down. And thankfully you were happy to come down, because that face-to-face training was, I think, invaluable to our employees, because in hindsight, we didn't know we were going to be locked down for as long as we were. But I think a lot of them were nervous around working from home and working 100% remotely. On top of that, we've just moved all their telephony and their ways of working had changed, and they were obviously given the information beforehand that was going to happen, but to be sat in front of and taught Teams for a couple of hours and what the features were, just put them in great shape to be able to leave the office that day.
Timing was either great or terrible, depending on your view.
yeah. I'm still clinging on to it was perfectly timed rather than luckily timed, but we'll go with that.
Yeah, I do remember that phone call, because I do remember that. Just in terms of our commitment, that was a Sunday. That was my birthday that I had. I remember it well, driving down. But yeah, it was the right thing to do. I remember actually we ended up doing the last batch of training remotely, and I think it's been, it's obviously been remote ever since then. So I think the face-to-face was in that week, and then we mopped up the rest remotely. So obviously, both yourself and the rest of the organisation have been using Teams and Teams Link for a while now. Do you think it's settled down? Staff happy using it? You've ironed out all of the issues now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the guys were really engaged with it and were looking forward to using it. We had a few nervous employees, particularly the guys in the contact centres. They were maybe the most nervous about it. And those kind of concerns they had were quickly washed out. So it's kind of a week, 2 weeks into using it, I was getting the feedback from, this is brilliant. This is just simple to use. It just works. Give me the training that we need. As with everything, there was a few minor little tweaks we needed to make, which we made. And since then, it's gone from kind of getting loads and loads of praise from people and people sing Teams praises to what everyone wants to hear in IT, which is not a lot about Teams. Because
just get on with it.
Yeah, it's working. It absolutely does what it says on the tin. It's I'm lucky with our employees that they've engaged with it so well and they want to use it. But the fact that it does the job, it's been great. They love it.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's good to hear. I think I always quote you when I'm talking to customers, because one of the biggest, and Mike will talk about this a little bit in his session as well as me, is one of the biggest barriers to people moving is investment in existing, particularly handsets, obviously on traditional PBXs, and they're not easy to move across to Teams, but you just took the decision to say you're not having any handsets, you've got headsets, and here they are, and send them home. And I think people just kind of adapt, don't they?
Yeah, actually, lockdown probably helped with that in hindsight, but we were going to do it anyway. Get rid of handsets and go with headsets and laptops, which is a massive culture shift. Before, everyone had their own phone and people saw it as their own phone, and they like that thing sitting on the desk, even though we all knew actually it's kind of a pointless entity. You don't need it. And we've proved that now. And the fact that everyone was going to be locked down, sent home, they weren't going to take their desk phone with them even if they had them. It kind of, now it's everyone's kind of said, oh yeah, we didn't need that thing taking up space on our desk for the last however many years. So one thing we worked out quickly though was on the headsets was so we went Teams certified, and it was well worth getting the Teams certified version. So we've had a few calls when people haven't got them to hand and they're plugged in their sort of
like AirBuds or something like that, whatever they've got kicking around.
Yeah, exactly. So one bit of learning I've taken from this is not to scrimp too much on the headsets.
Yeah, good piece of advice. And I know obviously you locked the office down for months, didn't you? But I know you've been back on and off since then. I know you've put a Teams room system in now into the main boardroom. So how's that working? Any thoughts about any other bits of technology you're going to put into the side of Teams?
So I mean, we're planning on adding at least another one Teams room to our head office, potentially two. Because the feedback we've had from that's great, and the reason we haven't put more in yet is just because the office isn't utilised as much as it was. If it was, it'd been 2 or 3 straight away. We're just drip feeding that as the demand for use of the office increases really. And the other thing is probably around call recording for our support care team. It's something they're keen on, so that's something else we'll look to move with.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, we'll cover that. I think Mike will cover that off in his section as well. And then just finally, Dom, and I think other than don't cheapskate on headsets, go with the Team certified ones. Is any other advice for organisations thinking about doing the same thing, moving their voice to Teams?
I mean, from my side, getting getting senior exec buy-in was a big part. So getting someone from as high as possible, really, whether it's CEO or as high up as you can get, was massive in terms of showing that they're engaged for other employees to get on board with it. Certainly, the proof concept was just, probably the best thing we did in terms of cementing it in our mind for our own peace of mind. And the other things really around getting your users trained. That took so much pressure off, and actually having you guys do the training for us was brilliant, because it meant from a resource perspective we were getting on with the day job while all our employees were getting trained. And then just to kind of, I suppose, manage the message in terms of the comms and when Teams is coming out. So we did a big piece on Teams is coming, your training dates are going to be this day. So it wasn't just like tomorrow Teams is coming and you're having training and then you're using it. We kind of did drip feed it a bit over the weeks and months before, which seemed to go well.
Yeah, I miss the face-to-face training because it saved me a fortune on Welsh cakes though, because obviously every time I come down and bring some Welsh snacks with me, but it's difficult to do that virtually, isn't it? Unless I send them all individually. But yeah, no, I think I mean, what we've seen from yourselves and other customers really is that end user training is key to adoption, because obviously you want people to adopt Teams more than just making and receiving phone calls. It's the whole package, isn't it, with Teams? That's a key part of it. So I think that end user training and as you say, senior exec buy-in are probably the two key things that we see as well. So now, appreciate your time, Dom. That's brilliant. So thanks for all your feedback and thanks for joining us for the call. I know you need to shoot soon, but you're around for a little while, aren't you? If you hang on, if anybody's got any questions, by all means post them in the chat for Dom. He'll do his best to answer them, or we'll pick it up with him after the session. So brilliant. Appreciate your time, Dom.
Cool. Cheers, Mike. Yeah, around for another 20 minutes or so.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. Kirsty, I'll just take over if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dom. So appreciate that. Dom being so honest and giving us the feedback around some of the challenges they had, and hopefully, from the sounds of it, it's made a massive difference, particularly with people working from home, obviously with a little bit of an accelerator. So I'll skip through this slide really quickly because Dom's kind of covered a lot of this already. And normally I would go through, rewinding back to that first article in the middle of March, really when people started to have to send their employees home, remote working, and although home working isn't a new trend, most of our customers actually weren't ready for it and had to suddenly adapt their technology and the way that their people work to allow them to work from home. This question here, will we ever go back to the office? And I think, for us at Risc, and I think, Dom, from what you're saying, I think the answer will be yes and no. So I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were before with, the acceptance of everybody being in the office at one time. I think some people are desperate to get back to the office. Some people are quite happy working from home, and there's a whole bunch of people in the middle. And then looking at organizations like Fujitsu is one example I found that have basically adapted their contracts to allow people to work from home permanently. And just in terms of numbers, and obviously, Microsoft numbers are always large, but Teams, the growth of Teams and what we saw in particular around the beginning of March, obviously when the pandemic started to take hold in Europe, there was a massive increase in users for Teams. So this time last year, I think the number was about just under 30 million daily active users, up to 115 million a couple of weeks ago. So the growth has been phenomenal, and touch wood, Teams has might have creaked at the seams, but it's been pretty reliable for most of us. And I think the important part, and when we look and when we talk to customers about where Teams fits and why they should be thinking about using Teams, not just for telephony, but for productivity as a whole and collaboration across their organization, is I'm making the assumption that most of you, if not all of you, are already using Office 365. You've already got Teams. It's part of that infrastructure. Whatever security you put around that, whatever configuration you put into Office 365 ripples through to Teams as well. It's not a separate product that you're having to think and worry about. And I think if you look at where Teams fits, and again, a question we get asked a lot by our customers is, well, surely Teams is just another application I need to learn. And I think potentially, but actually, if you look at the way Microsoft are trying to take Teams, it will become the only place that you need to go to get work done. So already Teams has got a lot of the existing Office 365 services built into it as a portal to Office 365. So SharePoint, OneDrive for Business being the obvious examples, they sit behind Teams as the file storage management. Outlook itself, although there's not all of the functionality, but the calendar that you see in Outlook is exactly the same calendar you see in Teams. And Microsoft are developing and accelerating the roadmap to bring more and more stuff into Teams, like your inbox as an example. Obviously, voice, video, meetings and chat that came from Skype is now built into Teams and enhanced, is much better than it ever was in Skype for Business. So you can see where Microsoft are trying to take Teams to be the portal for not just Microsoft products and services, but also third-party apps. So you can obviously add in hundreds, if not thousands, of different third-party apps into Teams, like WebEx, like Zoom, for example, so people don't have to leave Teams to get meetings set up. So for those of you that are not already using it, and again, making the assumption probably the majority of you have already seen it, if not already using it. So it's a single place to get work done. So whether that's one-to-one and group chats, whether that's online meetings like we're doing now, whether that's enterprise calling and voice, we'll kind of come back to that later on in the session. Obviously, out of the box, you can do some things with Teams. You can do Teams to Teams calls internally. You can do video internally. You can do external calls and video if you've allowed it at an admin level. But that's Teams to Teams. The ability to be able to call out to an external number and vice versa, receive a call from an external number, that needs a bolt-on, which we'll talk about, and Teams Link is one way of doing that. And then, as I say, there's a whole number of built-in Office 365 apps and third-party apps that can bolt into Teams. So I'll just quickly skip through that one then. And obviously using Teams app as your phone, and this is really important. We talk to lots of customers that have got traditional phone systems, whether they're cloud hosted or on-prem, where they need soft phones, for example, to be able to allow people to work from anywhere. And that generally doesn't work particularly well. Teams as an app is available obviously across Windows, Mac, web browser, iPhone, Android, iPad, and delivers pretty much the same functionality wherever you're using it. And that's an important distinction. So, actually, if you've got your users already using Teams and happy using Teams and navigating it around and chatting to people, then adding this bit in here, this little dial pad to give you a DDI number and the ability to phone out is not a massive leap, and there's not a massive training overhead to add that into Teams. So as you say, you've got your contacts there, you've got all your history, you've got your voicemail history, all in one place. And you can manage your call forwarding settings from that Teams app as well, which I say we'll cover in a bit more detail as we go through. And I think going back to the cross-platform, whether that's Mac or Windows or web browser, Microsoft have put a lot of development effort into making that experience consistent. Again, if you look back at things like Skype for Business, the mobile app, for example, wasn't great, so people didn't use it. Here they've tried to make sure that people use the Teams app wherever they are. So to say whether you're actually using the full Windows app or just using a web browser, the functionality is pretty much the same, 99% the same. Likewise, if you're using an iPhone, using the Teams app to make calls in the iPhone or an iPad, again, you've got that little pop-up pad. It's very, very similar experience. And I'll talk about some of and Mike will also talk about some of the other devices, hardware that's Teams enabled that will give you that functionality as well. So my sort of final slide on this section before I hand over to Mike is just really for those of you thinking about, okay, how do I add that Teams call and that telephony functionality into my Office 365 and my Teams app. So there are a few things that you need. One is called a phone system license, and that sits as part of Office 365 and is an add-on to your Office 365 licenses. And then you need a calling plan, and that can either come directly from Microsoft, and I think that's one of the options that Dom was talking about when he spoke to Microsoft originally. They have their own calling plans. We would always recommend to customers to go with what's called a direct routing partner, and we work with WaveNet, who I mentioned, and the product's called Teams Link. So basically that seamlessly plugs into Teams and connects their network to Teams. So effectively you've got a much more flexible, cost-effective calling plan with the example of Teams Link here with unlimited UK calls, plus international calls, plus additional stuff like the routing manager, which Mike will cover in his section. They also have a product called Teams Link Pro, which we can add on. So if you've got a more sophisticated contact center requirement, so if you want more detailed reporting, if you want things like skills-based routing, for example, then that's fairly straightforward to bolt onto there, along with things like call recording. And just to clarify, you can record meetings, you can record calls in Teams, but that's a manual intervention. So you can click record and it will record this meeting as we are now and save it in stream. If you want every phone conversation recorded for compliance, then we can offer that, but through the Teams Link product. You can't do that natively within Microsoft Teams. There's a little bit on Pro there. I won't go into too much detail and steals Mike's thunder on that one. And at the top end, if you've got, again, sophisticated multimedia, omni-channel type contact center requirement, then we work with WaveNet and their 5.9 partner to do that. So all the way from a basic Teams interface all the way through to full-blown multimedia contact center, we can offer that built on Office 365. Okay. Michael, I'll hand over to you now. How are you?
Perfect. Yes, all good. Thanks for that, Mark.
Hopefully I've made you a presenter now.
You have indeed, yes. I'll just start by sharing my screen as well. One moment. So let me know that comes through all right, Mark.
So look, yep, got the Teams Link, our passion to innovate slide.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I didn't. I think you've covered quite a lot in other slides, so I'm going to try and not do too much death by PowerPoint. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mark. So my name is Mike Korkidakis. I'm the channel manager here at WaveNet. So my role is working with distributor partners like Risc to help support them bringing our Teams Link product to market. I guess as a starting point, a lot of people are going to kind of ask sort of what Teams Link is. And obviously, you know, as I'm sure most people are aware, and Mark sort of covered it, Microsoft heavily invest in obviously the Teams platform as it is. But where Microsoft obviously don't do a lot of investment or even host infrastructure themselves is on the telephony side. So even within the UK market, as an example, to actually deliver the telephony element of Teams, Microsoft themselves actually go out to a tier one carrier to actually deliver their telephony side. So they very much do support direct routing partners like ourselves. And to put everyone's mind at ease, that's one of the reasons I kind of start with this slide, is because, you know, in the features bit, it kind of ticks two really key boxes. So this is a Microsoft approved solution, and we do use all Microsoft certified hardware. So, you know, when you're asking sort of what Teams Link is, as a direct routing supplier, nothing changes in your Office 365 environment. We make no changes to your tenancy. We are just simply, by enabling direct routing, we just change the route in which your cold traffic gets pointed, and that just means it points to our infrastructure rather than directly through Microsoft's infrastructure, which routes through the tier one carriers, like I mentioned. And the real reason that a lot of customers would do that, the reason obviously, you know, Dom and the team at Alzheimer's did that, is primarily moving towards sort of this slide. So this is kind of where we sort of stack and kind of position the product in comparison with, you know, the Microsoft Business Voice product. And this kind of covers a few sort of key benefits to our product and why customers choose to use it. Mark kind of mentioned that kind of the very first point is the way we do tariff the product is sort of unlimited domestic minutes to landlines and mobiles. So it just makes a very, you know, simplistic price per user model. I do appreciate the Microsoft call plans do have quite a lot of minutes inclusive. They are bundled minutes, so I do totally appreciate that you know, that they are kind of like for like there. But I guess that again is kind of the key to the product as well. From a commercial point of view, we're in line with that sort of Microsoft pricing, but just some of the things I'm going to cover today are some of the benefits that come with the products. So obviously number supporting is supported. We do provide UK DDIs in every major location. A big key one for us is this next point, though, is that we do actually offer, because we are that sort of true telephony provider, we do offer DDIs currently in 127 countries, and that is constantly expanding. Microsoft only do this at the moment in 16, because as I mentioned, they're building those partnerships with tier one carriers, and it's only recently that they bumped up to 16. It was 11 or 12 up until recent months. But we do provide international DDIs in 127 countries. Another point to that, though, is not only do we just provide the DDIs, but we do have local access points in different geographical locations across the world. So as an example, Australia and America. So it does mean that not only are we providing those international DDIs, we are providing the most relevant geographical breakout point to make those calls. You wouldn't want a user, in Asia Pac, as an example, routing back to the UK and out of the UK and back. So, we route that call traffic through the Australian data centers to prevent things like latency. A lot of the next points are kind of standard features you'd expect to see in any sort of phone system. Things like the ring groups and the follow this on routing, auto attendance, music on hold, and call queue functionality. That's all sort of standard stuff. We do have a visual routing manager in our product, which does make the product a little bit more simplistic to build out call routes than what you get inside the sort of the Microsoft Admin Center. And I will cover that in a moment when I pull across the portal. Advanced disaster recovery. And this is a key one for us. This isn't just where we sort of sit in the marketplace against Microsoft, but this is where we sit in the marketplace against all various different other sort of direct routing suppliers. So obviously, Mark mentioned that our organization is WaveNet. I came from an organization that WaveNet acquired called Via back in December last year. Via's entire expertise and our singular focus was just multi-tenanted Microsoft telephony infrastructure. So we started in kind of the communicator space, into Link, into Skype for Business, and into Teams. So all of Via's expertise was all very much in that sort of team space. And that ties into this sort of advanced disaster recovery piece and how we've actually built the infrastructure of the product. So we are not, we're completely carrier agnostic there, which means that we don't sort of rely on one single carrier to deliver our network. In the UK, as an example, as is true for any of our data breakout points, is we do partner with multiple tier 1 carriers in each of those locations. So in the UK, as an example, we partner with 7 major tier 1 carriers. So it does mean if that one tier 1 carrier does experience an outage, it does mean that we can route our traffic over multiple other carriers. And because we operate that multi-tenanted infrastructure across a complete aggregated SIP channels, allowing us to do that, it does mean that for you as an end customer as well, we just deliver this completely over just connectivity. There's nothing that you need on premise. It is simply just internet access, and that's all that's needed to deliver our solution and to deliver Teams Telephony. Not only does that sort of tie into the redundant element, it also ties back into that international piece because we partner with all various, tier 1 carriers internationally, domestically, etc. It does allow us to give the most aggressive, bespoke international calling rates as well. And that's a big kind of difference between, our product and the Microsoft sort of stack there. For anybody that doesn't know, in terms of international minutes, if that's a requirement that you do have, if you do deploy business voice with Microsoft, that kind of only comes in 2 flavors, and that's either you're paying additional for international bolt-ons, allocating a certain amount of minutes internationally on a per user basis, and only those users with the bolt-on can pull from the pool of minutes, or if you want it done on kind of like a more rate card route, it does mean that you're purchasing what Microsoft call their calling credits, and that's billed against personal credit cards. So especially if you have a bit of a larger estate, it makes it very difficult to manage your international call costs and all those things. Whereas for us, it's very simply a rate card, pence per minute rate to specific locations. But we can work with you and get very granular and make sure you're getting the most competitive rates if you do have sort of destinations that you call on a regular basis. We do have skill-based routing in the product, which I'll show you shortly. We do have group voicemail. Oddly, that's seems like quite a basic feature, but it's a feature that a lot of organizations really like. So it does mean that a particular call route can terminate on a group voicemail box rather than obviously built natively into Teams. Unfortunately, a call route does need to terminate on an individual group, an individual's voicemail box, or you just simply have to turn the feature off. But we can terminate to a group voicemail box. So if you had a sales team, as an example, that call route can terminate and notify everyone in that group that there's a voicemail message to ensure things aren't missed. Mark kind of covered it off, and obviously Dom mentioned that this might be a requirement for them, is we do offer MiFID II and FCA compliant call recording in the product as well. And this is quite a big one for us. Mark kind of mentioned that you can obviously ad hoc and store things on particular meetings if you want to engage those. But obviously we offer a completely always on recording solution that is FCA and MiFID II compliant. And the reason that we can label it that way as well is, you know, kind of going back to sort of that expertise that we have. We develop against Microsoft's releases of APIs, so things like their graph APIs and their policy APIs allow us to capture internal Teams to Teams traffic as well. So it does mean on the call recording piece, unlike some of the other providers out there, and obviously Microsoft themselves aren't delivering it, it does mean that we're capturing Teams to Teams activity in the recordings and not just external PSTN activity. So it does mean that, you know, we do a lot of work with sort of the financial and legal sector in those regards as well, because we are completely compliant in that regard. And that also includes things like GDPR and PCS compliance as well. So through the product, there is things like pause resume features to be able to take, you know, card payments on the recordings as well, and be able to pause to take card payments. So that's built in to the product also, as well as having things like, you know, wallboards and dashboards in very basic contact center functionality that's built natively into the stack of the product. But Mark did mention that we do have things like much more advanced contact centers, if that's a requirement, that can integrate with Teams as well. So what I'm going to start by doing is I want to give everyone just a really quick walkthrough of kind of the back end of the product and sort of how it works, and kind of touch on a few of these features that I mentioned already. So I'm just going to pull across our portal. So as I mentioned previously, to deliver the Teams telephony or through our product and through obviously Microsoft, all of your end users are just using Teams. Nothing changes there. That's completely the same. Mark kind of already touched on sort of the dial pad, how that's enabled in Teams, how individuals can change and route their own DDI traffic within the Teams client. So none of that changes. The only people that are going to see this back end are people like Dom, people that actually administer the solution, or the team at Risc, the people that actually kind of handle all the administration of the Teams telephony side of things. They're the only ones that are going to see this. So what you have kind of in the main dashboard is obviously you can do things like raise support tickets. One of the things you'd expect to see from sort of any portal is you have the ability to view the operational health of the solution, as well as any sort of incident reports as well. So you can, you know, I mentioned some of the other locations that we have. You can just simply just click just to make sure everything's operational, and subscribe to any relevant updates as well. So all that stuff's built into the product. The setup tab, this is kind of the key hub to the entire product. And this is just shows how simplistic it is to ensure that you get all this Teams telephony functionality, but it's very easy to manage. In the setup tab, you'll see things like, starting on the security side, you can set like, you know, simple things like block callers lists. You can set things like a dial policy for the organization or particular users, so you can restrict access to specific locations. You can set up user access and security groups. So this is enabling you to, you know, allow certain individuals access to certain parts of the portal. You might want a contact center supervisor, as an example, being able to view certain dashboards, but not be able to sort of view, you know, user information or make changes to call routes. You have that complete sort of flexibility on the user access and the security group side. In the common tab, you'll see things like media as an example. This is where you go to sort of upload, and it's simply just by uploading a file, any of your sort of IVR recordings, your announcements, or your voicemails, and they are simply uploaded by, you know, typically, you know, a WAV file, an MPEG, an MP3. Whether those are professionally recorded or you record them yourselves, you just simply upload those files and then give them a naming convention, which you can then use later when you're creating call routes. You also have the ability to manage things like those group voicemails. So you can simply just create a group voicemail and add particular users to that group voicemail, and you can manage all that from the portal. You can have a view of all of your users as well as even adding things like external numbers into the portal as well, if you want to add things like mobile numbers into the solution also. This is also where you go to simply create users. And this is, bear in mind, this is just creating a user to be able to use Teams telephony, but that's just done very simply in the portal this way. And this kind of comes in sort of two flavors. So depending on where your Active Directory is stored, if you're using something like, you know, Azure AD as an example, we do have an Active Directory sync tool, which means if you create a user in your Office 365 tenancy, it does pull across to the portal, and, you know, you simply get a drop-down menu for that user that you select, or you simply just obviously go through and create a user manually. You can manage multiple domains through the portal, so you can allocate users to specific domains. but it would just be as simple as selecting your users, assigning a number from your range of DDIs, and your user is instantly ready to use Teams Telephony. So you can spin up users very, very easy. One of the other bits I mentioned is the visual call routing manager. So a really nice feature we have in the product is this. And for anyone that's used the Microsoft Admin Center, you'll definitely be able to confirm that this is just a little bit more simplistic. So even anybody without any sort of technical expertise can get a very simple view of how easy it is to set up a call route. This call route is simply anybody that calls this number, it routes, in hours. So it's got what's called the time condition on it, which is weekday, so Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. and calls route in this direction. And these are where they hit the recordings that we've uploaded from the media tab. So you can see how easy it is to sort of structure out your call routes. And it is as simple as if I go into the setup tab and click on create a call route, you can start by naming that call route. And the nice thing about that is this kind of also ticks a box for some of the disaster recovery stuff that you might want to set up on the telephony side of things. So you can obviously just template disaster recovery models, meaning that all you need is internet access to then engage a call route. So it sort of helps tick that box as well. So I would just simply name this call route, choose my time zone. I select a DDI, so I pull from the range of numbers I have available in the organization. And then I just start my click-through process. I might want to start with that time condition piece. And this is where you can set office hours, specific days of the week where hours might change and how you want to control your call routes, or things like Christmas, specific holidays, specific days you might be closed and how you want things to route. Some organizations have, out of hours that route to external contact centers or, external services. All those things are possible and very easy to set up and to control your own call routes. You can add things like your IVRs, which is, press 1 for, press 2 for, any announcements or voicemails. And all this stuff is just pulled. The audio tab is just pulled from that media tab that we showed you earlier. So, you would just give your recordings a naming convention and you can choose to add those into any of your recordings. What you also have here is the two options. One is a ring group. So if I had this particular number, I can click on and I can give this ring group a specific name, but I can click on this and start adding specific users I want to add to this ring group. A ring group just simply means I have a ring time of 20 seconds. It means any users that I add to this ring group, it rings those users for that period of time, and the first person to answer the call answers the call. But what we also have is what's called skill-based routing built into a call queue. So as you can see, here's an example of a call queue. You can see I've got a whole bunch of agents ranked in here at all various different skill levels. So you can rank agents from 0 to 100. And obviously, the higher the skill level, it means it rings to those users first and then sequentially down in order. Through a smart agent selection backend, it has things like if you have a whole bunch of users on the same skill level, it'll ring to the person that's been most idle the longest. So those sorts of things are ticked in. And you can obviously do things like stack a ring group, move that into a call queue, and you have complete flexibility on how you want to set this up and how you want to control this yourself. Just moving on as well, I'll just cover a few more bits here. There's also some, like I said, very basic contact center functionality built into the product, which has things like a supervisor dashboard. So this enables you to sort of see a view of all your agents, any live calls that are taking place, the route in which those live calls came in. It's very odd because there's actually no live calls at the moment. Normally there is. This always happens on a demo, but typically there'd be some live calls here, and it shows you the route in which those calls come in. And I can do things like take agents, set them to busy, log them out, start a break for them. So I'm taking those agents out of a call queue. I can cycle through all the relevant sort of call queues that I want here. So you can obviously get granular to specific teams if you want, but this sort of just enables a supervisor to have a view of kind of, agents or service desks or whatever are working at the moment. So you have an idea, you have an idea of how that looks and you can manage all of that. And this obviously in kind of the times that we're in right now, with everyone kind of working remotely, as you can imagine, this sort of stuff's been very, very valuable for our customers because it's allowed them to work really simply, as well as having things like, live and active wallboards built into the product. So you can see some, some specific stats and publish that stuff onto wallboards should you want to be able to do that. I'm just going to quickly open up the call recording portal as well before I continue on. I'll quickly show that. Just bear with me one moment. Perfect. So in the call recording portal as well, I'll just show a few just like quick bits of this. The call recording portal can obviously go very, very in depth. There's a lot of different things that we have in the portal that I'd like to show. I'll start by clicking play on a particular recording. So as you can see here, you can start by doing, simple searches. You can search by day. You can search by from or to specific phone numbers if you're looking for a specific recording. You can search by specific users, should you want to be able to do that. And then you can actually get into more things like text searches and looking for specific metadata markers, which is one of the reasons I pulled up this particular recording. So you can see this is a conference call as an example. So you can actually get a visibility of when particular people join the call, times in which they spoke, and you can actually export just those specifics. You can see things like get a transcription of the actual product as well. So you can obviously do things like text searches and those sorts of things. You can play any of the specific recordings. You can export just specific clips of the recording. You can do things like copy the URL if you need to send that specific recording to, a solicitor, an HR person, a team leader. You can do those sorts of things as well. And obviously with call recordings, this can be restricted to, specific users, specific teams. You can lock down, who has visibility of all these things as well. There's complete customization there. You can do things like place a legal hold on the recordings as well, because call recording does come in two retention flavors, a 90-day retention period or a 7-year, which is the full sort of FCA and MiFID compliant retention period as well. That just gives you a really quick overview of sort of how it works, but there's a lot of detail that we can go into sort of call recording and audit login and stuff, especially for sort of, financial institutions, how you make notes against the recordings and those sorts of things. So if this is of interest as well, by all means, get in touch with the guys at Risc and we can do a more in-depth session on this stuff as well. Kind of the last piece of the puzzle I kind of wanted to sort of cover off on the portal is reporting. And reporting is quite key for a lot of organizations. So we do have some very basic reports that exist inside the portal, but a big sort of key to our product is we have what's called a live data query API. What that API does is that plugs into analytical tools like Microsoft's Power BI product. So if you do have very basic reporting requirements, you can run at any point in time these specific types of reports. There's a few in the contact center thing as well. So agent summary will be like sort of average handle time, average wait time, those sorts of things. If you just have very basic level reporting requirements, this stuff does exist. But we do have that data query API, which feeds live data into analytical tools like Power BI, and where you can get things like customization and automation into particular sort of reports, things like this. And obviously with Power BI, you can set that complete customization to build your own reports. You can set the automation to have certain reports sent to you at particular times, but this is all live data. So in our product, we actually have some Power BI templates that are coming live. So this gives you a few examples of particular ones. So calls not answered the first time, including re-rings and failovers. You can see this is done by queue and by specific individuals, and you can click on these and get more granular in detail. You have things like contact center agent summary, so a little bit more detail, and you can get much more granular by cycling date ranges. You get specific stats like how many calls somebody was answered or offered, how many they answered, how many they ignored, what average handle time was, and those sorts of stats. Just all stuff that you can really customize and get very, very bespoke on. This one's a really, really interesting sort of Power BI template. So this is like a heat signature map, essentially. It gives you sort of the key destinations that are calling, and it actually sort of highlights in sort of heat signatures kind of, where most of the calls are coming from. You can get this from inbound and outbound. And then, of course, you can click on any of these and get more granular levels of detail. So it's just really, really nice to sort of cover that off and, get all various levels of detail in the reporting, as well as sort of advanced session summaries. So you can get, duration of calls per day, how many calls were offered, and you can have a stat of, all the, hours, who handled them. So, you get all the stats of who's handling most of the calls, the amount of time people are spending on calls, all stuff that, again, especially working remotely, that have just been really, really valuable for a lot of organizations. And that kind of ticks the sort of reporting box and the actual sort of product box as well that I've given you a bit of an overview on. The only last piece I really wanted to touch on quickly as well before I hand back to Mark is kind of on the device side as well. So I did mention, obviously, how the product can span across, the multiple different devices. But the nice thing about Teams, I know Mark mentioned it earlier, across things like a mobile device, is that it is a familiar experience across all the devices with Teams. So whether you are using your mobile client or, a laptop or actually a physical handset, the Teams experience is quite the same across all the device range. And for anybody that doesn't know, with Teams, you can have what's called 8 instances of the application running at any one time. So, as a user, you can have, your mobile client, a laptop, a tablet, or, any of the other sort of, things that are available. And you can have 8 instances running at the same time. So, you can choose sequential ring orders across different devices and what devices you want to take calls on. So you do have that flexibility as well. So it's just really nice that you have that same sort of continuity across all the products and all the devices. And that just kind of ties into sort of, 2 of my last slides here, which is just all the various different devices that you can get. So it just shows that Teams can cater to any sort of specific individual requirements, from like the peripheral stuff, like the Sennheiser speakers or Jabra do them. All various different organizations do them. Just very basic small conference speakers that you can use in things like huddle rooms. The various different sort of headsets and earpieces. Dom mentioned that that they've invested in good headsets, and that's been valuable for them. But then you can have things like actual physical Teams phones. So there are Teams devices that run the Teams client natively, allowing you that Teams experience across actual physical handsets. So we do a lot, and kind of like in particular the Yealink and the Poly space, we do quite a lot with these devices. And you do have things like Team display devices, as well as, of course, another thing that Dom mentioned is kind of your collaboration in your actual Teams room systems. So you can treat, specific rooms the same way you treat a user. So that Teams experience of how you want, all that collaboration, the video collaboration, how everything works, screen shares, all those nice tools are pulled into your Teams rooms as well. And it's as simple as kind of inviting rooms into meetings, simply walking in and be able to join meetings straight away and get that full collaboration experience across all the devices. And in particular, obviously Microsoft have come to market, finally out live in market with things like the Surface Hub as well. So you get that kind of entire sort of wallboard experience across the devices also.
Depending on what your budget's like.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
they're not cheap devices, are they?
And all the devices come in all various different range and flavors. Like, I only have a few on my slide here. There's so many that exist out there.
Yeah, that's sorry, the Yealink system there on the left of the middle square is actually what Alzheimer's have got, the MVC 800, which works really well. It's got decked wireless mics, which you can move around the conference room, so that works perfectly for them. So yeah, that's not outrageously expensive compared to kitting out in the traditional way a full remote meeting room.
Absolutely. And I guess it's just sort of the last piece from me. This is a very basic slide, but of course, obviously, we do this all the time in terms of deployments. So obviously working with the team at Risc, we ensure that deployments and how we deploy the product is very simplistic and very easy, no downtime for the organization, and we work with you on that. This actually, what you're seeing on my screen right now is in all my years in telecoms, which despite my hopeful youthful appearance, is quite vast. I do have about 20 years experience selling all various different types of telephony products. The way we do this is actually the most simple and basic, but it just works really well. So we use a product called Process Street. And what you're seeing here is typically kind of a master checklist of all the steps that need to take place in deploying a project. We give you access to this. Risc have access to this to help manage the project through, and it is just essentially a master checklist of all the steps that need to take place to deploy the product. And it assigns the responsibilities of what each user needs to do. you can write comments, all various different things. A very simple management tool. We do this all the time. We have a very finite process, and we can make sure that there's no downtime for your organization, and a very smooth transition to Teams is very much the point there. So yeah, that's it from me, Mark. I'm gonna wrap up and pass back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I didn't mention Adam in the chat asked a question about obviously the fact that WaveNet are now amongst a huge bunch of vendors providing SIP trunking services into Teams, and what differentiates you guys other than the fact that you back off to 7 carriers, so the resilience is there. I think I answered it in quite a long-winded way, but project management was one that I didn't put on there, and that is critical. And the reason that Dom's still happy to jump on a call with us and talk about their Teams implementation, the proof of concept went really well, and the actual transition, live transition went really well, number porting, all of that kind of stuff, and that, although we were fronting it and managing it, was handled by WaveNet at the back end. So their project management, again, is second to none. And I think, on my opening bit, I didn't talk about the fact that I spent 5 years at Microsoft, and one of the first partners I met, so this was 2012, was a company called Via. In fact, they weren't called Via at the time, they're called Smart Hosted Solutions, that then became Via, which is now WaveNet. So they have been doing this since at least 2012 when I met them. So I think that's a key differentiator. Lots of people coming into this market that are providing phone lines into Teams, and that's okay if that's what you want. If you want something that's going to be a little bit different in terms of functionality, thinking about reporting, thinking about the portal that Mike showed you through, and some of the other features that you can add on later that you might need, like some of that contact center functionality, call recording, Power BI reporting, then it's that kind of thing that differentiates what WaveNet do with Teams Link compared to some of the other providers. Hope that makes sense. They used to have a tagline, didn't they, called "A great product made better." I think it was when they were hosting Skype for Business, and I think that's still exactly the tagline, isn't it? That Teams is great, but the Teams Link product makes it better. So I will take back over then. Hopefully you can see that slide again, Mike. Is that back on?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, brilliant. So appreciate this. This is the final section. I've just got a few wrap-up slides really, and some of this will just hammer home some of the points that Mike made, but also cover some additional bits and just a look ahead to tomorrow, some of the events that we're running tomorrow as well. And this is actually our version of what Mike showed you in his demo. So this is obviously Risc. We use that as our live platform. This is our main number coming in, and all of that stuff that Mike talked about, whether that's interactive voice response, in hours, out of hours, handling calls differently, going to ring groups for sales, technical, etc. That's all handled by the Teams Link product, as you'd expect. We're not going to give live demos of making and receiving calls, basically because it's difficult to do it when you're actually sharing your screen in Teams anyway, because you tend to get cut off. But Microsoft have very kindly put a series of little videos together that are embedded in these PowerPoint slides, so we can share these with you. It just shows you what the app looks like. So making a call, receiving a call, transferring a call to another user, putting a call on hold, all of the stuff that you would expect to be able to do, and you obviously can do using Teams. So that's a basic Teams call with a pad. And then just very quickly, you'll see it pop up on the bottom right, call coming in, answer that call, click the 3 dots, find whoever they're looking for, and obviously you can chat with them online using Teams before you put the call through. So very, very basic stuff, and obviously we cover all of that Teams functionality, calling functionality when we do our end user training. There are another couple of questions in the chat, Mike. I'll come back to them in a second. Let me just kind of get through this. Microsoft very kindly dropped a whole new bunch of features that are coming in December on us this morning, so we haven't had a chance to build all of those into the session for today, but there are a number of updates, one of which is called the new calling experience. So if you're currently using Teams for making calls, then this will look slightly different. So what they've tried to do is build everything you need to know while you're making calls into one screen. So which devices are you using at the bottom, the call pad, previous calls, call history, and then your speed dial settings. So and there are some features that they're bringing in that have been missing from Skype for Business, call merge being the big one that's been missing, that's going to be delivered again in December from Microsoft. Yeah, Mike's covered the devices. Again, same thing. This handset here, we have a lot of customers using this Yealink handset, which is effectively a phone with an Android application sitting on the screen. If you've still got people that want to use handsets with Teams, Microsoft are bringing some more basic functionality next year, so you can use some basic SIP phones for Teams as well as these fully functional, therefore not cheap phones. But I think what we found, particularly looking at Dom's example from Alzheimer's, is ideally, try and encourage your users to go with the headset because it's more flexible, easy to move around, back in the office, working from home, and cheaper to upgrade. So that tends to be the starting point for us. I'm not going to go into these in lots of detail, but as with Teams as a whole, the calling part of Teams, they've accelerated the roadmap and crunched what was going to be done in the next 2 years down into a couple of months, apparently. So some of these ones that I've highlighted in yellow on the right are pretty much there now. As I mentioned, call merge is due to land in December. Pop-out calling window. So if you're a Teams user, you can have pop-out chat now, so you can have multiple chat windows running at the same time. You can't do that for calls yet. Again, that's going to be coming. And that call recording there is, again, user-initiated. So unlike the stuff that Mike talked about, which is compliance-based, always on, record every conversation and transcribe it, this is, you press that record button in Teams and it will record the conversation. So there's still some stuff that they're due to deliver. But generally, I think, as Dom says, pretty much everything's there that you need to use. And I made a note here, Alzheimer's themselves don't actually use the Teams Link Pro, although they had some small contact centers with their old PBX. They found that the standard Teams Link product with ring groups did everything they needed it to do, to be honest. So actually, you'll find that if you want that additional functionality, things like skills-based routing, then it's there as a relatively low-cost bolt-on. But actually, the core product will do most of what most organizations want, unless you're a full-blown multimedia contact center. Again, I'm not going to do Microsoft's sales pitch for them here, but again, I'm sure you've seen with Teams, particularly the meeting experience with the 7x7 video streams, etc. They've delivered, I think Microsoft said yesterday, something like 160 new features in the last 6 months to Teams, something like that. So yeah, it's definitely accelerating and it's constantly updated. And I'm sure you've seen this together view, which they developed for education primarily, but actually if you're in a large meeting with a large group of people, that kind of view can work quite well. Apparently it's better. It's a better view for people to interact online. And then obviously got the large gallery view here, which will show up to 49 users at a time. So actually they've gone from, think back to when I was talking to Dom in March, Teams was 2x2, so 4 live video feeds, then went to 3x3 and then 7x7. Clearly playing catch up with Zoom, but I think pretty much overtaking what Zoom can do now. For those of you that are really interested, obviously they build Teams into the overall Microsoft 365 roadmap. So that's just a screenshot from a couple of days ago. Some of the features that are coming, they've got 129 in development. So they're all of the features that they've committed to deliver at some point over the next however long, 12 months is normally the window. There are some other features that people are asking for that aren't on that roadmap because they haven't committed to doing them, but you can take a look at that, something called user voice for Teams as well. Some of you may have seen that. So you can effectively vote on features and vote them up the stack. But actually this is useful if you want to know, okay, what are they going to deliver? What are they committed to do and when? Normally they only give you a quarter, or in this case, a calendar year. So might not be that accurate, but they normally give you a quarter when it's going to be delivered. And just a little kind of shout out for us, of course, Risc, in terms of how we can help you. So we have a couple of ways we can. Obviously, I think as I mentioned in the chat, we're obviously a Microsoft Gold partner, but also a WaveNet Platinum partner, so we can do both from a deployment point of view, from a training point of view, and from an ongoing support point of view. Plenty of reference customers. Obviously, Alzheimer's the one we talked about today, so we've got a case study on our website, and we'll give you the link to that as part of the follow-up material. We've got a couple of pre-packaged consultancy engagement, one called Fast Track, which is a 2-day engagement to help you understand what teams do you need, how should we set them up, how do we secure them, do we want external and guest users, things like that. So more of an admin decision maker level. And then we have Quick Start, which is our end user training package as well. So again, we can help there. Obviously, for some of you that are existing customers of ours, we're already doing this for you. We're already providing 365 and supporting it for you. If you're not, then obviously we can look at doing that for you through our Risc Plus offering. And then if this is something, if the voice side, if the Teams Link side is something that you're interested in trying and you're already using Teams, then we can give you a 30-day proof of concept for free for up to 25 users. And again, the details of that will be in the follow-up material that Sean will send to you after the event with the recording. So there's a quick snapshot of the case study. So yeah, just finally, in terms of the events we've been running this week, this is the 4th of 6. So there are a couple more tomorrow. One is around those of you that use Azure, how to ensure you're making the most of it and optimizing what you spend. For those of you that are thinking about moving to Azure, how to make sure that you don't, I was going to say don't spend too much, how you control your Azure spend. And then finally, the final session tomorrow is around deploying Teams best practice. So some of the stuff that we would cover in that Teams fast track engagement around what teams do I need, how do I structure them, who needs to be a member of them, how do I share information, how do I secure it, and that's the final one tomorrow, and we've got a presenter from Microsoft on that one joining us as well. So I think that's probably enough from me for now. I think Sean, you popped the details of the sessions for tomorrow in the chat window, and as I mentioned, you all will get follow-up information and the opportunity to win a Surface Go 2, I think. The latest Surface Go anyway, Surface Go 2. There'll be a prize draw after these 6 sessions have run, so make sure you fill out the form and enter yourselves into the prize draw for that. There are a couple of questions I think probably not going to answer Will's at the moment. There's probably a little bit more depth there. We'll come back to you on that one. I think that's around integration with sort of bot services like AWS Lex, Mike. I think we probably need to have a chat with the dev team just to see where that is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, our advanced contact centers will do all sort of AI and bot integration stuff. So yeah, that's definitely a conversation we can take offline.
Yeah, I think, Will, you're probably thinking more about what can be done sort of out of the box with Teams Link. So let us take that offline. Obviously, you'll get my details if you haven't already got them as part of the follow-up material. By all means, just pop me an email and we can have a chat and see how we can help you. Brilliant. And yeah, so it's 3:20 now. I think if there's no other questions, we'll wrap it up there and just say appreciate your time, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully see some of you on the sessions tomorrow. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.